warning, your marketing might just work. Surely that's the whole purpose of any spend that you have, to be able to get your marketing to work. But I want to quickly talk to you about my fear of people that spend and spend and spend. You see, I believe, and I've got statistics to be able to support it, that 80% of business owners are wrong about everything. You can have a groan if you wish, that's fine. But 80% of business owners are wrong about everything. Let me show you how. Unfortunately, these are not next week's winning lottery numbers. So if you were banking on being able to earn your fortune from the lottery, this is not the right way to do it. However, if I was to share with you that 1% of business owners in your industry right now are creaming it. They are at the very forefront of technology. They are actually excelling in everything they do. And if you think for 1 minute with regards to the 1% of businesses in your industry and sector right now that are creaming it, and you think, God, if only I could have 1% of what they were doing, you'll be able to identify with who I'm referring to. There are a further 4% of businesses that are well on the way to joining the 1% club, that are doing exceptionally well for themselves, that are growing year on year by 40, 50, 60, 70%, and are well on the way to that recession-proof status of 1% club. And there are a further 15% of companies that are getting on and doing okay for themselves. But there are 60% of businesses in your sector, in your industry right now that are getting by, and 20% that are failing. Now, my fear is that these statistics aren't made up. I haven't just fabricated these. These are official statistics from both the Chamber of Commerce and the Federation of Small Businesses that have monitored in the last 4 years over 500,000 businesses in the UK. Now, how many people here are already in the 1% club in their industry? How about the 4% club? Can we have got some 4%ers that are well on the way to the 1% recession-proof industry? Okay. Who tends to associate with the 15% club that are getting by, that are doing all right for themselves? So perhaps there are more people here that start to resonate at present with the 60% that are doing okay and getting on by, or perhaps the 20% that are struggling. And that doesn't matter what section you're in or sector you're in. Unfortunately, that's the current status of British business. So what I don't want you to do is spend any time at all. They've got a new website. We've got to get a new website. They've got a flyer out. We need to have a flyer. They were on the radio last week, we ought to do a radio. Because if you follow the competition, the chances are you're following 80% that are getting it wrong anyway. Isn't that reassuring? Just nod or shake, it tells me you're not in a dentist's waiting room. Who here has ever had that honorary phone call or an email on a Thursday afternoon from either the Telegraph or the Times? You know that one on the Thursday afternoon at about 12:30, 1 o'clock, and it says, Mr. Allen, we've got some really good news for you. There's some last-minute editing space become available in the business edition of our Saturday morning pullout, read by over 156,000 people, which if you could get your copy to us in the next 90 minutes, instead of us charging you £15,000, you can have it for just £1,500. Has anyone here had that phone call or email before? Yeah. So how many people have considered putting £1,500 on a credit card, because you weren't planning to spend £1,500 on marketing today, to quickly scribble some copy together to be able to get your message to 154,000 people? Isn't that such a wonderful opportunity? Yes? No. You see, if that's your idea of marketing, then Connor, I would suggest to you that if that was your idea, then the best thing you could possibly do is to take the £1,500 that you've put on your credit card and give it to the closest stranger that you meet and pray that they feel so pitiful for you that they actually come and spend a few quid with you. Because that's the only way you're going to get an effective return on investment if that's your idea of a marketing strategy. Does that make sense? It really does concern me that people don't understand, in order to make your marketing pay, and for every penny of it to pay, then you need to follow 3 simple rules. Market, message, media. Now, before I go any further, let me just quickly share with you very briefly as to how I've ended up standing on this stage in front of you, as to why an ex-soldier might have anything to do with marketing his own business. You see, for 12 years, I was a frontline soldier as a paramedic with 2 para in the British Army. That's where I thought my career was going to be. That's what I did. I had a very successful career. I enjoyed what I was doing until one fateful day in July 2003 when I was medically discharged. Now, when you've put all your eggs in one basket and all of a sudden somebody comes along and just torches the basket, you're left with this consideration: what do I need to do next? And despite the fact that I have 2 different degrees, I have 10 years of management experience working all over the world with one of the most professional fighting forces in the world, my CV did not allow me to be able to get a job. Is anybody here in HR or got an HR type background? Just so, close your ears, I don't mean to offend you. But you see, my CV on paper, I look good. I've got a couple of degrees, I've got some experience, I've got some testimonials and some references. On paper, I was offered a job. I was offered the interview. In actual fact, for 12 months after I left the army, I was offered 163 different interviews. Unfortunately, at interview, they often ask me the question, Jay, on your CV it says that you left the army in 2003 and we're now in September 2005. Do you mind telling us a little bit about what happened in the difference? Where have you been for the last 2 years? Well, I believe in absolute honesty. I don't believe that you can do smoke and mirrors for the rest of your life, so I just tell people, that's fine, not a problem. I was sectioned under the Mental Health Act because I've got post-traumatic stress disorder. Ironically, you don't tend to get many offers of job satisfaction and opportunity when you've mentioned the Mental Health Act. For some reason, I'm a weirdo. All of a sudden, instead of being good on paper, I've now become a long-term sickness absence risk. And as a result, I can't get a job. And with hemorrhaging cash, because I've got a mortgage and a wife and kids and all that sort of stuff, I realised that the only thing I could possibly do was to try and set up on my own, because I can't sack myself. So I set my first business up in 2005. I took it from 3 staff to 11 staff in 11 months, and 11 staff to 22 staff in the next 11 months. I got bored one day and decided I wanted to try something else, so I set up a second business with a partner, and we took that online to 1.2 million in 3 years. I set my third business up with a joint venture with somebody else, and that's still doing all right for itself, but I got bored. And I took to speaking about 4 years ago, just to be able to share with people these simple 3 rules that you could apply, that we've applied in 3 businesses to be able to grow by 40, 50, 60, 70% every year for the last 5 years. Does that sound something of interest that I might want to be able to share with you? Fabulous. Just yell and shout. It makes me more encouraged to be able to share even more with you. So first of all, market. Know your market. There is nothing worse than getting the wrong type of client. Let me quickly show you something. Who here has a database of their current clients? The people in the front are doing okay with hands up. The people at the back that haven't yet got that, that's a really good idea to start, to be able to start taking some details about who are your current clients. For those of you who've already got a database, I'd like to suggest to you that the best thing you could possibly do from tomorrow onwards is grade your list. I might add very quickly, it's not a good idea to tell the clients that you've graded them. But the biggest thing that we did in our own business is we decided that we needed to be able to grade the list and establish as to who do we want to work with. So I've graded all of my list A, B, C, D. Now it might sound really simple, but I'd quickly like to run through you exactly what those refers to, because you might be surprised at some of the detail. First of all, an A-grade client is not automatically the person that spends the most money with you. An A-grade client is the person who is the most profitable to you in your business. There is a big difference between somebody who spends a lot and needs a lot. An A-grade client is almost automatable. They spend much and often, they buy when you sell, and they buy what you sell. We can replicate those easily, and we can scale. A B-grade client is similar to an A-grade client. They spend much and often, but they do need some TLC. You know, that little bit of bespoke stuff that we might have to do just to be able to make it feel that they're special. A B-grade customer could easily become an A-grade customer if we teach them how to do it. Because let me face it, guys, it is our fault if we haven't got an A-grade list. It's our error that we haven't educated people well enough as to how to become an A-grade client. So a B-grade client is much and often, but he's less automatable. It still needs some me time. Now, most business coaches will stop there and tell you, stop working with C's and D's. They are sparing you the lifeblood that's preventing you from growing your business by scaling with your A's and B's. A lot of other people will tell you to cut the list in half and only work with your A's and B's. And the risk of doing that is the fact that your list could currently consist of C's and D's. And by cutting it, you've just made yourself unemployed. You see, a C-grade client, there is a specific need in business for your C-grade client. In the military, there is always the need for private soldiers. So a C-grade client might not spend that much or that often, but they are your die-hard fans. They are the people that got you to where you are today. And if you failed to acknowledge and recognize that, if you ever find yourself in hard times or overstretched, it's a C-grade client that will look after you. It was a C-grade client that will put bread and butter on the table and turn the electricity on tomorrow morning. There is always the opportunity in a business to be able to work with a C-grade client as long as we understand who they are and what we need to do. And ladies, please forgive my French on a Sunday morning, but a D-grade client is simply an arsehole. If you don't like that word, my apologies. Perhaps I ought to refer to them as a mood hoover. Those people who, I don't really care how much money they spend, every time the phone rings and you just think, oh my God, why didn't I just accept that job with the bank? Now, the very fact that this lady is laughing so openly means that you've associated straight away with some of the people who fit into that category. You see, my fear is if you go out and put that £1,500 on the Telegraph advert, you're at risk of advertising to people who swarm your business and turn out to be D-grade clients. How much excitement would you get from that 1,500 quid? When every time the phone rings, you've just got a mood hoover. You see, unless we know who our A's and B's are, we don't know who's to market to, and we don't know who's to market against. You see, if I start marketing to my A's and B grade clients, my C's and D's aren't interested in that type of advert. I cease to become attractive to D's and C's, so I become more attractive to A's and B's. Does that make sense? So first of all, we need to know a little bit about your market. Now, the beauty of social media, and the reason why I'm here in a social media conference, is the fact that it's so easy to do. What I want you to do is to spend a little bit of time doing some market research on your A-grade clients at present, the people on your top of your list, the people that you want to attract more of. Who is your ideal target market? Are they predominantly male or predominantly female? I don't mean to be sexist or racist or anything, but I can assure you the way I market to a male customer tends to be rather different to the way I market to a female customer, purely because I tend to find in my industry that males have a different priorities to a female for the same product. How old are they? Sir, might I just ask, I've made eye contact with you, sir. Your ideal target customer, Daniel, how old are they? Ish. 40. 40. Kevin, how old's your ideal target customer? 40.
40, between 30 to 48.
Between 30 to 48, and that's interesting. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to understand one quick theory with regards to age. My second degree is in NLP and psychology. And I'd like to suggest to you that we all grow up in bands of 7 years. Let me quickly show you something. From 0 to 7, you are dependent. From 7s to 14, you are learning to become independent. From 14s to 21, you believe you're completely independent. From 21s to 28, you go out and prove that you are absolutely independent. From 28 to 35, you start to compromise. It's called marriage. And realize that you're not quite so independent. From 35 to 42, you might end up with a dependent. From 42 to 49, you wish you'd never bothered. The point I'm trying to raise is the fact that if you think that you're targeting between 30 and 50 or 40 and 58, there's 2 or 3 different age bands there, and the way I communicate with somebody at 40 might be different to the way I communicate with somebody at 55. Does that make sense? The more I get to know about who they are, the more I can start to make sure that my message resonates with them. So what's their lifestyle? Where are they? What are they doing outside of work? What's their profession? Does that matter? Do I want to market to accountants in a different way to the way I market to plumbers? Probably so. I used to work for an organisation about 2 years ago, and we brought out a test method where we were going to be the UK's largest marketing agency that specialises in done-for-you marketing. Does that sound interesting? Now, we knew that we wanted to target 12 different niches. We knew that there was no way of being able to turn around and say we are the UK's largest marketing agency that specialises in done-for-you marketing for 12 different people, because that didn't make sense. So on day 1, we launched, we are the UK's largest marketing agency specialising in done-for-you marketing for accountants. And we only marketed it to accountants. Little did they know that elsewhere, we were the UK's largest marketing agency specialising in done-for-you marketing for dentists. And although some accountants do have teeth, you tend to find that less of them read dentists' marketing literature. So their profession was very important for us to understand as to how to market to them. And then income and income band. Now that stuff is relatively easy if you just go scratching at the surface around the profession, around what the job application forms to determine as to size and salary and this and the other. But I want you to go significantly deeper. I want you to start to ask loads of other questions that might allow you to understand a lot more about the person you're targeting. I'm going to very briefly share a story with you about how I did this and for 18 months considered a professional stalker. At the time, I ran a health and safety consultancy, and I can assure you there is nothing sexy about trying to sell people fire suppression systems. It wasn't my greatest hour. However, we were in that industry, and I knew that I wanted to get into the speaking industry. So whilst my LinkedIn profile read that I was the managing director and founder of a health and safety company, I started to do research to learn all about speaking and the speaking profession. Now, the first thing I learned is that there were 10,500 people on LinkedIn that in their job title said speaker. So I knew that it was a relatively busy industry. Now, lots of them had speaker trainer or speaker presenter or speaker author, but only about 1,300 of that 10,500 only had the word speaker. It was their main profession. So I knew straight away that I wanted to be one of 1,300 and not one of 10,500. The next thing I did is I found out that half of those were members of an association called the Professional Speaking Association, so I needed to be part of that and get a badge. I also looked to find that there were about 250 different speaker booker agents that were responsible for booking speakers. And I found the top 3 were all based in London and one of them happens to be called JLA. Now, because my surname is J. Allen, I decided through no scientific research whatsoever that I was going to target JLA. I went on LinkedIn, I found that 27 of them had an active LinkedIn profile, and I sent a personalized request that said, I'd like to link with you on LinkedIn. I was the managing director of a health and safety consultancy with nothing to do with speaking. But 13 of the 27 accepted. And by that, I got to see their full profile. I was able to start watching them on Twitter and Facebook. And cut a long story short, I decided to target a young lady by the name of Jennifer. And for 5 months online, professionally, I stalked Jennifer. I shared stuff with Jennifer. I used to send her interesting articles. I used to send her YouTube clips and TED Talks. I used to send her stuff that I thought might be of interest to her. When she commented on Facebook, I always put a nice, friendly reply. So much so that 5 months later, Jennifer was inviting me to join her. She'd just launched a walking group and wanted to know if I wanted to go walking. The first thing I did is bought a pair of walking shoes. I spent 5 days on stage in suit and walking shoes, so I didn't end up with blisters on Saturday when I met Jennifer. I'd even learnt from Facebook that she had a dog called Chocolate. So I brought dog biscuits on Sunday morning for us to meet while we went for a walk. And over 5 weeks of walking on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning with me and her and a dog called Chocolate, I got to know Jennifer so much that she liked me. Not that way, just professionally. She's married and so am I. But we'd built rapport. She actually said to me on the 3rd week, Jay, tell me all about fire suppression systems and why you're so involved in it. And I went, really? It's boring. What I'd love to do is I'd love to be a speaker. And she said, you'll never guess what. Over the next 18 months, I invoiced JLA £176,400 because I'd built a reputation and relationship with a person that was responsible for doing the bookings for speaker. It was Jennifer that allowed me to travel to 13 countries last year and deliver one of these talks in 13 different countries. And ironically, although I left JLA about 18 months ago now, there was no requirement for me to pay 30% commission fees. I still get a Christmas card or a birthday card. I got a photograph of her little daughter at Christmas, and she still believes it was a coincidence that we met on LinkedIn. You see, what I'd done is I'd looked and decided who was my ideal target market, how was I going to be able to market to them in such a way that I'd built reputation with them. I'd already built up the emotional bank into some profit before I started to cash it in by saying, can I have some business? Does that make sense? For anybody here over the age of 30, it's about going back to dating before you ask them out. It's about courtship rather than just thinking that it's a one-bam, thank you man, one-night stand. So step number 2. What message do they want to hear? Again, there are too many business owners that get it wrong and think that your message is important. And I've got some really bad news for you. They don't care about you. They really don't care about you at all. What they care about is fixing the problem. My fear is that too many of us are still determined to tell them all about us. So I've got a little story about that. About a year ago, I failed. I say that most sincerely because I didn't just fail in business, I failed far more significantly than that. I failed my wife. I knew I'd failed because she said, Jay, you've failed. You see, my job on a Sunday morning is to make sure that Nikki, my wife, has tea in bed. She likes to lay in on a Sunday with the paper and tea. And she was up, and the paper wasn't there, and she hadn't got tea, and I'd failed. You see, I normally get up quite early on a Sunday morning and go into the home office so I can do some study and some thoughts, and I usually write my blogs before she wakes on a Sunday morning. And on this particular Sunday morning, I got up, I'd gone to have a shave, and whilst I was using the tap broke in my hand. And there's nothing worse at about 6:10 on a Sunday morning than having to hold tap and then think, do I dare wake Nikki and say, I need you to call a plumber, as opposed to waiting for her to wake naturally and say, you can't have your tea this morning. So what I tend to do is I can't live without a phone in pocket, so I've got one hand on tap and I'm thumbing through phones to try and find a call-out plumber that does home service on a Sunday. And I found one. He'd registered on Google Plus Places and I'd found him, he was quite local. And I clicked and I was trying to find his website and I went on his website and he just threw up all over me. We are an award-winning plumbing service. That's great. Where's your phone number? We have 35 years of experience in the plumbing industry. That's marvellous. I still need to find your number. We have an eco-friendly fleet of vehicles. Wonderful! Where's your bloody phone number? And I had to click and click and click and click to finally find a phone number to get him to come out. When he came out, he did a wonderful job. He fixed tap. He was really clever. Because you see, you can't have one tap fixed. You've got to have a pair of taps fixed. You can't have a new hot and an old cold, can you? So straight away the fee's doubled. And then just before he leaves the bathroom, he just glances across at the bath as if to say, you can't have old bath taps and new sink taps. So before you know it, I've got a new bathroom suite. Now, thankfully, I didn't have to pay there and then. He did say I got 7 days' notice and he was going to send me an email. When the email arrived, I opened the invoice. I thought, oh my God. I really did think I just bought a new spa room. There was a 24-hour call-out charge for out-of-hours service. There was a Sunday supplement charge. He didn't have any eco-friendly taps. He only had the nice, posh, expensive tap. That's when I wanted to know that he's got 35 years experience, that he's got an award-winning, not when I needed to find his phone number. You see, the problem was he hadn't put himself in my shoes. He'd just decided to tell me all about him. So what message do they want to hear? You see, it's not about you. You just blend into the background of everybody else that's throwing up all over customers. If all you do is you tell people about how good you are, all they want to know is, are you able to provide the right solutions to my current problem? So let me quickly show you as to how I've used this to my advantage. I've wanted to get into this particular corporate industry for about a year now. I desperately wanted to start to work with British Gas. There is a reason for it. I'd like to travel some more, and British Gas are actually doing exploratory stuff in the Middle East at the moment, and I'd love to be on their preferred supplier books so I can go to the Middle East. And for 4 months, every time I've tried to make communication with them, they've said, Jay, your proposal looks wonderful. It's not our main priority at present. We've got this big thing that we're trying to deal with. You're number 2 on the pile. Does anybody else resonate with that you've just not quite got there at the end? And after 4 months of trying phone calls and emails and sending them stuff and sending them value and quantity and quality, I desperately wanted to build up the emotional bank. And yet something else was more pressing in their world right now. So after 4 months of trying and getting nowhere, and you might think, how often do you try before you give up? Well, the simple answer is, the moment you give up, somebody else in your competition hasn't. So keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going until you get something. So after 4 months, I chose to change the way I operate, and I just simply said to the British Gas, what is it that's causing you such a headache at the moment, which is preventing you from being able to look at my proposal? Because I know it's of value to you. And they said, Jay says, in this particular sector, in this particular part of the business, we've got a real problem with retention at the moment. And there's no point us talking to you about scaling and growing the business if we haven't got the staff that we could trust to be able to grow it with. And I says, well, why didn't you say? One of my clients is a team dynamics psychologist. Perhaps I could put her in touch. You might be able to do some work and fix the problem. Jay, that would be wonderful. Can you introduce us? Rebecca went in, she did 3 weeks work with them, and they phoned me and said, would you like to go to Saudi in February next year? It's not about you trying to sell to them. It's about understanding what is their current problem, and can you fix it? All I did is I looked on LinkedIn and found Rebecca's details and put the two in touch. But can you fix it in such a way that they see you as an emotional opportunity? Something where you've built up the emotional bank in order that when you choose to cash some of that in by asking them for some business, They feel more compelled to do business with you because you've already built a relationship with them. Does that make sense? Just nod or shake, it tells me you're not fallen asleep just yet. Fab. And then it's about the media that you use to do it with. Who here does Facebook advertising? Who here is on Twitter? Who here's got a website that is interactive and you... They're all the traditional common stuff, aren't they? They're the stuff that we expect to have, and Instagram and Pinterest and all the other stuff that goes with it. The simple answer is once you've identified who your ideal target market is, once you've established as to what it is that they are wanting to look for, now you can start to find as to where are they hanging out. So you understand that, do I need a website? Do I need to be on Twitter? Or should I do a radio advert or a big billboard advert? Who here has come across the drinks brand Innocent Smoothies? You all familiar with Innocent Smoothies? Are you all familiar with the overnight success story of how Innocent Smoothies got to market? Can I quickly share that with you? Okay. So Innocent Smoothies started off by two university students who didn't know each other before they came to uni in their first year at uni when they were in university halls. For the first term, the only communication parents had had with said child was usually through some form of social media. They usually used to see the drunken photograph on Facebook. And after a term of seeing drunken photographs on Facebook, they became so concerned about their child's welfare that one parent chose to send a fruit bowl and the other one sent a big tray of vegetables and said, you need to be eating well because the only thing we're seeing you is McDonald's. Now, can you imagine how well that went down for two university students living in halls when they've got a delivery of vegetables? You see, what they figured was the only way that they could possibly save face was if we could put it all through a blender and add vodka. So I understand that the first ever batch of smoothies consisted of broccoli, kale, carrot, turnip, and vodka. Now, unfortunately, they ran out of vodka way before they ran out of vegetables and fruit. They actually started to have competitions as to how vile it could look and whether it was still drinkable. And yet very quickly they found that students were coming from other dorms and saying, can we have one of those smoothies? They're really nice because there's nothing else in them. So the two of them decided, perhaps there's something in this. Maybe we could make it work, and maybe we could generate something that is innocent. So they took a £9,000 bursary and a £9,000 bursary from two students, and instead of spending it on student accommodation and rent and books and all that type of stuff in the January, they had £18,000 and they said, we've got to get big or go home. So the first thing they did is they took £3,000 and hired a private detective. Quick show of hands, how many of you have ever hired a private detective as part of your marketing strategy? First mistake. You see, what they did is they hired a private detective and they said, there are 5 people that we want you to follow. I'm not talking about weird raincoat type following. I'm just talking about, I want you to follow these 5 people and I want you to learn as much as you possibly can about them. I want to know when they go to work, which routes do they go to work, how do they get to work, when do they travel down the motorway, which motorway do they travel down, what time do they leave work, which routes do they go home, do they go to the gym on a Tuesday evening or a Wednesday morning, do the kids go to football or rugby, do they swim or do they go to the gym? I want to know about their lives and there's only 5 people to do it in. Can you come back in a month and give us a report? The report came back. They'd spent £3,000. The landlord was already knocking on the door. You're a month late with the rent. Oh, they've been late with the bursary. Give us a few weeks. They'd spent £3,000 out of an £18,000 budget in 4 weeks. The next £15,000 was spent on 4 billboard ads, 16 bus stop ads, and a radio jingle. Now, they could only afford to get 4 billboard ads up for a month before they had to come back down again. So the billboard ads went up, the radio ads went up, the radio ad went out, the 16 bus stop ads went out. And on the last day, before everything got taken down, they sent 5 letters. We're already on the TV. They weren't, but you can't remember not seeing them there. We're already on your local radio station. Yes, you are. You've seen us on the billboards, you've seen us on the A-frames, you've seen us all over the place. We're already talking to your competition, and we'd love to talk to you too. Well, they were talking to the competition. They'd sent 4 letters to the other 4 competitors the same day. It just so happened that they'd followed the buyer from Tesco's, the buyer from Morrison's, the buyer from Marks and Spencer's, the buyer from Asda, and the buyer from Lidl. 4 of the 5 signed a contract that day because they didn't want to be out of the competition. And 3 years later, they sold Innocent Smoothie to Coca-Cola for £10.7 million. Was it worth the investment? Does it make sense to be able to identify who do you want to talk to? What do they need to hear in order for you to be the right solution? And then determine, what do I need to do to get my message in front of them? Does that make sense? If I'm going to close today, I'd like to quickly share with you one other thought before I hand back to Des. It's vitally important that we understand the 3 rules about market, message, media. So before we do and spend any money on this, we've identified as to who do we need to talk to, what do they need to hear, in order that they start to ask for us by name and not simply search for us by industry. Now you see, Google put out, about a year ago now, page 2 on Google is a really great place to bury a dead body, because nobody looks there. And if you are on page 2 or page 3 or page 4 or page 5, you might as well not be there at all. You've got to get above the crease on page 1 if you want the traffic. Bearing in mind that Google per month gets about 1.2 billion hits. If you combine that with YouTube, ironically owned by Google, 986 million hits a month, you've got a hit rate of about 2 billion a month of people looking for a solution to the problem. Now you see, I got really excited when I won my 2nd international award. I won my 1st international award, a Big Impact to Business award, awarded by the Kaufman Institute, the largest networking organisation in the world, in 2012, when I delivered a keynote speech that they said had massive values to the audience. Now I knew the benefit of being able to market and commercialise from having won an award. Somebody else that accredited that what I said was valuable. So what I did is they gave me a nice piece of glass and some stuff and a few quid. To win the award, I got $5,000. And what I did is I took $5,000 and put it on Google pay-per-click advertising. You see, I hadn't earned that money, I'd been gifted it. So it didn't matter if I got it wrong. But I put $5,000 onto Google pay-per-click about having won a Big Impact to Business award and pointing them to either my Twitter feed, my LinkedIn profile, or my website. And I sat and waited for the phone to ring, and my God, did it ring. For 3 days, I ended up having to employ someone just to answer the phone because of the amount of times that people were typing in for Global Entrepreneurship Awards, and my name was coming up. Ironically, 5 weeks later, I took a phone call from the Kaufman Institute in Manhattan that said, Jay, we need to talk to you about your website. I said, why? What's wrong? You told me I was allowed to use this title, Big Impacts to Business Award winner. And they went, yes, we didn't realize how well you were going to commercialize out of it. Your website and your Twitter feed are above our genetic listings for our own website. You've pushed us to number 3 because we don't spend $5,000 in 4 weeks on pay-per-click advertising. I said, that's great. If I can get you one more, you're below the curve. You see, I want to be known out there as a speaker that gives value, massive value. I don't want to sell you anything today. I want to be able to give some things to you that I know will make massive difference to you in your industry. So when I go on Google and I put my name in, I'm all over Google. My LinkedIn profile, my Twitter feed, my blogs, when they type my name, there is nobody else to compete with. They're looking for me. Whereas if they're looking for a big impact speaker, I'm hoping I'm on the page, because there's many of us out there. Think about your unique offering. Decide how you're going to package that in such a way, even if it's a quirky way, that makes you stand out from anybody else in the crowd. And then put it out there, because this stuff works. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Jay Allen. I offer a masterclass in the secret art of highly effective communication. My stand is the first on the left there. I have a book called Battlefields to Boardroom, 10 Ways to be able to beat mediocrity. And I'm here all day if you want to talk. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.